Oh, live. Okay. Good evening, YouTube. My name is Hasper TV, and I don't know if you guys saw my earlier stream today about the fixtures, but tonight I've got Carl on, and we're going to talk about how you became a Spurs fan, your fondest memories, what you see about the future, and I can't go a stream without talking about Basuma, so we'll get on that later. So, first of all, Carl, I've known you for like a number of years, and I've always wondered with just many people, like, how did you become Spurs? Was it through like family? Was it through just an experience, like you saw a game, or?
No, for me, mate, I was born into it, so all my family are Tottenham and they all lived in Tottenham. I mean, when I was born, we lived about a 10-minute walk from White Hart Lane.
Oh, wow.
So for me, it was you're born, you get a Tottenham scarf or baby grows chucked on you, and that's it, mate. You're Spurs for the rest of your life, and there's no looking back. So, yeah, obviously my dad, massive Tottenham fan, season ticket holder. Obviously, me being born and my sister, we both follow Tottenham. So yeah, it was in the blood, as they say. There was never any doubt of following anyone else or going and seeing anyone else or growing up thinking, oh, who should I support? I like football. It was, listen, we're all Spurs. You're joining the clan. You're going to suffer with the rest of us, and that was it, mate. We was off and running.
So, do you remember your first game or your first few memories of watching Spurs?
I know
vaguely.
Yes, I know my dad says he took me to my first game in 1980.
Okay.
And it was at White Hart Lane, and I think we beat Forest 2-0, and it was Hoddle and Crooks, I think, scored. But I was like 3 or 4, so I don't really remember it. But he said, yeah, I took you, was on my lap and all that kind of thing. But again, the first game I think I really remember, I think was in something like 80, 83, playing and we played Everton at White Hart Lane and we beat them. But that was the first game I really remember, when you're walking around the ground and you get all those smells and the atmosphere building up. You got the sellers outside, and there always used to be a guy outside White Hart Lane, peanuts, anyone want any peanuts? And that's, that guy with his peanuts stuck in, just stuck in my head. And then obviously you get that thrill of walking into the ground and walking up those steps, Cody. And nothing beats it. And to be honest, still to this day, whenever you go football, that walking up the steps to go and look out over the pitch, I don't think that will ever get boring. I don't think there can be anyone that doesn't say they still don't get that thrill of walking up the steps and looking out onto the pitch, and I've been lucky enough to pass that on to my boy who's had that, thrill of doing that. And I mean, I took him to a 0-0 boring draw for his first game, so I don't think he was too impressed with that. But he's still Spurs, and yeah, they're great memories. Them memories.
I mean, for me, I'm born in '92, so everyone who's watching the stream knows my age now. But
a few years, I was a few years before you, mate. Only a few.
What were your early years and experiences watching Tottenham? Because for me, obviously, it was the '90s, and my first proper game I remember was saying from '99.
Okay.
My first memory was when we lost 3-1 to Arsenal and Carney scored.
Right. Okay, that wasn't a great. You unfortunately grew up in that era where we were getting pumped by them on a regular basis.
That was a random comment, but okay. And then, and also just the Worthington Cup final with Alan Nilsson. Now, obviously, you a few years before me, like you said, do you have any early memories of 80s games? Sorry, like the late 80s, or even that a very vivid game or very vivid memory of going to Tottenham match?
I mean,
that was like.
I was fortunate because going in that sort of era, those early 80s and mid 80s, we were a really good side to go and watch. Obviously never won a title, obviously, but we were picking up cups. The 2 FA Cups, the UEFA Cup, and we were always doing well in the league. We were always up there. 3rd, 4th, 2nd. We always just seemed to fall away at the crucial point in a season, just never quite had enough to get over the line, But I grew up watching some fantastic sides in those 80s, in those 80s sides, our Dealys, Hoddle, Vila, Perriman, Roberts, Hazard, Archibald, Crooks, Mark Falco. They were great sides to watch because, even though you weren't winning leagues, there was never boring games. There was just so much talent on display. So I was quite fortunate that, grew up watching those sorts of teams. And then, like as you say, then suddenly the sort of late 80s come, and we'll talk about it, but 87 was probably was a season where we were so close to touching ultimate glory.
Was it Birkinshaw? Sorry.
So Birkinshaw was the manager when I was born. He was, the General Birkinshaw, and he would go down as my favourite Spurs manager of all time, for me at the moment. Conte, Poch's come closest to him, but Birkinshaw was brilliant. And then obviously, we had people like Pete Shreves, who wasn't that great. And then towards 86, 87, we got David Pleat in, and like I say, he was so close to touching
I heard about that
the ultimate greatness that. Again, it was just that thing. We just could never get over the line in any of those competitions, unfortunately. But that side was the side where that's the closest side that's reminded me to like the 16, 17, side of Poch had, where we were really serious contenders. That was a great side. But then, as you say, then we kind of moved into the sort of 90s. And again, we had some, good sides growing up there, Gazza, Lineker, those sorts of teams. And then it just, it just started fading after that.
How bad was Christian?
Oh, Christian Gross, yeah, he was that was bad. That was just something, even from that first press conference with the tube ticket in his hand, where I think even Alan Sugar was looking at
waving
him.
It or
yeah, like look what I've come on, and I think even like Alan Sugar looking at him, thinking, "Oh, I think I've made a massive mistake here." And he didn't last long. And it was a pretty bad era.
Was there like a Spurs side when you were growing up, or a Spurs player even in particular that you look back on and you think he was like amazing, or he was like a great manager for us? That just because like for me it was someone like Stephen Carl, David Ginola.
Yeah.
And then the manager I remember, obviously maybe it was a bit later when I was growing up, Martin Jol was probably like the first manager when I thought, this guy's really good.
Yeah.
And I do remember Hoddle as well, but
yeah, see, I'm fortunate.
Not as bad. But like for you, was there a manager like you had Birkinshaw, you had Shreves, who I think did quite well still, and David Pleat. Was there any one of those managers who thought this guy was like really, really good?
Birkinshaw was the main man. He was a great manager, and obviously when you look at the history with him, it was the fact that the board wanted to have too much involvement in how things were being done. And ultimately, he was somebody who was like, look, listen, just leave me to run the football club. Yeah, I'll buy the players, pick the team.
Yeah.
But you had Irving Scholar at the time who wanted to come in and get too involved. So he was like, this ain't for me. And he walked. You sort of sit there and think, could he have won even more if he'd stayed? Where would we have gone on to even better things, or would it have just kind of dwindled after a little while? So he was a great manager. I think if you talk to any Tottenham fan around that era, they'll sit there and say he probably doesn't get the sort of plaudits that he should in the modern, like if you have Twitter debates, the Tottenham's greatest managers are like Yole, Redknapp, Poch. And no one sits and goes, well, actually there was one before all those in Keith Birkinshaw who really brought the glory days back to the club. He was a brilliant manager after, the best manager after Bill Nick. He doesn't get the recognition he deserves. So I loved him, and obviously player wise, anyone probably around my age will all probably say the same man. And that's Hoddle. He literally is my number one idol.
But what was, because I wasn't alive then, what was he like in terms of, because the only comparison I've heard with Hoddle in terms of with today's player story was Luka Modric.
Okay.
But what was he like? Because only I've seen videos. Obviously, he was gliding past players and that sort of thing. But obviously, probably got Diaz as well.
Yeah. I mean, he was just so silky. I mean, it was just like watching it was like watching it's a genius at work. And when you consider the pitches that they were doing it on, the fact that back in those days, you know, you had people like Graham Souness wandering around, snapping everyone in half. You know, there wasn't players weren't protected like they are today, and the guy could just do things that no one else could do. You know, first time passes with the outside of the foot that weren't just, oh, it's gone reasonably in the direction of where that player is. It has gone perfectly where that bloke wants it and where he's running. He was just before his time, I think. You know, if he was playing today, you'd be talking about 150 mil sort of player, footballer, because he was that special and that good. You know, the goals, you know, you've only got to look at a YouTube compilation of Glenn Hoddle goals, and there's none of them that you go, oh, that was a fluke. It's, you know, they're all passed into top corners and volleys inch perfect. He was the only player I've seen closest to him was Gaza in terms of midfielder for talent. But yeah, Hoddle was just special. You know, like I say, on in the conditions as well that he had to do it in those days.
Because I imagine also in those days, because I saw the latter part of the 90s, I'm always on the opinion that back then defending was a lot better. In the 80s, was defending a lot more rough, and obviously it was a lot more rough, but was it better than it is now? Is that why you think someone like Hoddle could come in today's day and age and still be like one of the best players in the world if he was?
Yeah, see, you always get that comparison, don't you, where people say, oh, those players back in the day, they couldn't cope with the demands of the game today. And you sit there and go, I'm not so sure about that. You know, they never had the fitness tools that today's players have got. They weren't playing on the carpets that today's players are playing on. You know, you look at some of that old footage and they were playing on mud baths, basically, like Sunday league stuff. The boots and everything weren't as modern and sophisticated as they are now. The game was, you know, you literally could kill people, you know, and only get a yellow card, you know, for killing, so taking someone's head off, you know, and it was like, yeah, yellow card, where today you'd be like, mate, you'd be red and you'd be banned for months with a tackle like that. So I always sit there and think, if you brought someone like Glenn Hoddle into his prime today, with the fitness that he could get and the, you know, pitches and balls and refereeing around him, I think the guy could more than cope with what today's footballers cope with. I don't think you could bring a modern footballer back into that sort of 80s and 70s and they could cope, because they just wouldn't be able to cope with it. You know, the tackles, the kicking, so yeah, it was harsh. I mean, when we say the defending, it was brutal. You know, you got these big lumps, and they would kill strikers. You know, it was like you're taking your life in your hands every time you went on a pitch. So yeah, I would. I guess that thing of like, is it better than it is today? Is it? No, it's hard to really judge, because, you know, each part of the game was still good. You know, I think you probably saw some bad defending. I mean, I look at some of the old footage and you see certain goals where you go, oh my God, that is dreadful, you know, or you look at games and think, does the passing look as good? Is it as sharp, as crisp and everything like that? But yeah, it's hard to judge, but back then it was tough. I mean, I remember a Spurs game where Tony Parks took over being our main goalkeeper. And it was a game at White Hart Lane. And this game always sticks out in my memory, because we played Charlton at home. And he went to get a ball on the floor, and the Charlton guy, just with his studs, straight into his mouth. And he actually knocked him out in his mouth. And the ball bobbled out of his arms. And the ref was just like, play on. And they scored. And everyone was going mad, because Tony Parks was just on the floor, splattered, face everywhere. Oh, wow. And you're just like, well, he hasn't given that as a foul. And they went 1-up. And I think we drew that game. But it was just completely different. Like today, let's say, it just would never have happened in today's game. If someone
on today, maybe he wouldn't be able to play football ever again or something.
Yeah, you get done for TBH in today's game, you know. But I just remember that image constantly, you know. And no one really seemed to moan that much about it. The fans were going mad, but the players were just like, oh well, we get on with it. So yeah, it's very different. The game has come along.
I think sort of like the change was when they started changing like yellow cards and red cards, and that's sort of the level of what's deemed a yellow card, what's deemed a red card. Because I even remember when I was growing up, the late 90s, when you had Roy Keane versus Vieira, and these big proper rivalries, which I don't think we have the same today, to be honest with you. I don't think it's that fierce as it was.
Yeah.
And people just smacking each other, hitting each other, and the players would somehow still be on the pitch.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what's going on? I don't remember the Dyer and Bowyer incident as well. Did they both get sent off? I think.
The Newcastle guys having the fight. Yeah, I'm not sure if they both got sent off. I think they might have done. I mean,
I remember stuff like that doesn't really happen nowadays. But did you ever see anything? Is there, obviously you mentioned that game, but is that, on the other hand, was there one game that you always remember that's one of my favourite with Spurs games? Just
I mean, I always go to one of my favourite ever games to have been to was actually at Liverpool in the FA Cup with the Klinsmann and Sheringham, the FA Cup quarter final. I went there.
91. That year, or was it?
No, that was after that, wasn't it? That was 94 or something like that. I think 94, 95, if I remember. And we went up there, and I was just, in school, sort of thing, just come out of school, viewing for mates. Sorry, managed to get tickets. And we went up to Liverpool on the coach, as you did back then. And it was just like, Liverpool, we got no chance up here today. Anfield, Spurs, no chance. We had the whole away end, as you did back then for FA Cup. And it was just, the game started and we played really well that day, but they went one up, and you're thinking, oh, here we go. This is it. Then Sheringham equalises with a curler off the post. And I just remember being near the top, and before I knew it, I was near the pitch because fans all just bundling downstairs and everything, and then when Klinsmann got the winner, that was just unreal. And I think it was the year after Razor Ruddock had just left us to go to Liverpool as well. So everyone was giving him stick as well, like, Ruddock, what's the score? And that game, that game was just like, that is always one of my favourite games I've ever been to, because that was just, not many people get to go and see us win at Anfield. So to be there for that game.
It must be rarity.
Yeah. I mean, my dad,
2011, I think.
Yeah, my dad, who'd been going for a long while, said, I can't believe it. I've been to Anfield a few times, and all I've ever seen us do is get hammered. So, like, you're lucky you've been there and seen us win. And the only other one game that really sticks out was when we played Luton at White Hart Lane, and I think this was 91, and we were dreadful. We were really bad for the start of the game, and I think it was the second half, and Luton, I think, took the lead, and then all the floodlights went out. So all the players had to go off the pitch, and it was like, that's done us a favour. And when we come out and when the lights went back on, we murdered them 4-1 in the end. The result was, and it was like we just come out when them lights came back on, and we tore them to shreds. And that's a game that always sticks in the memory, that one.
For me, because I'm obviously younger, but the one game that is probably one of my favourite ever games was when we beat Arsenal like 2-1 after so many years under Danny. Yeah. Danny Rose got that goal.
Okay.
Because I was also one of the few people in the car that night, because we used to have 6 tickets, and who actually thought we might win. Everyone's like, oh no, it's fine, we'll draw, the draw's all right. I'm like, no, we're going to win the game. Because I had it in my head. I was like, we're going to win the game. And it's also just for the old White Hart Lane for you, what memories, apart from that losing game, that you remember so well? Because obviously everyone talks about the European nights, or the old White Hart Lane with the floodlights and that sort of thing. Like, my dad always mentions Anderlecht.
Okay, yeah.
Is there one that sticks out for you at all?
Yeah, do you know, I mean, there are so many games there. The Club Bruges, I remember, in the UEFA Cup, was a game that was just a brilliant game. And it was a game where there were a couple of goals scored. Mickey Hazard curls one in from the edge of the box, where the goalkeeper's just left standing there. And you actually see the movement of the ball going in. And then a little while after that, Graham Roberts absolutely creams one top corner. And that night, it was just, like this mental, bizarre atmosphere where people started thinking we're going to win this tournament. That was a brilliant.
All the tattoos.
Yeah, it was. I remember things like the Paxton, standing in the Paxton at the time. You know, we used to sit on the shelf when I first started going with my dad, and I always remember when I first started going, we had this really old boy who used to sit behind us. And any time a player got injured, he'd bring out the shovels, and it was just memory, little things like that stick in your head. But the old White Hart Lane was just, don't get me wrong, it wasn't always a brilliant atmosphere. I remember lots of times where it was, half full and not that great. But when that place was rocking, I think you see lots of old pros now will actually sit there and say to you, when quite often when I hear old pros ask, where did you like going and playing? Lots of them will say White Hart Lane just because of the atmosphere and everything there. So it just goes to show you how special that ground was and how it used to be.
Okay, so this is a bit far random question, but so is there a player you never liked at all?
God, that's Jason Dezelle, I think, for some reason. I always remember when we signed him, we thought we were getting this brilliant player from Ipswich, who was an attacking midfielder who scored goals. And he was just dross when he came to us. And he used to be, really, one of those players you got quite excited about because at Ipswich, he was ripping it up. And I remember when he came thinking, we got ourselves a real good signing here. And he was absolutely dreadful. But other than that, I mean, I've never had players that I'd actually go, I actually hate this guy, apart from the obvious things like players like, not being funny, Aurier, when you're just thinking, this guy's a walking disaster.
Garley.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing with someone like Garley was he was never a permanent fixture or that. He was a little bit part player here and there. So we've had lots of them over the years where you think, I won't be sad to see the back of you, mate. But I've never had a real hate for anyone.
I with Garley, I have a bit of a weird opinion about it. So, my dad had met the Egyptian manager or something.
Okay.
This was just before we got Mido. And he was like, "Oh, you guys are getting Mido," and you asked him about Mido, and blah blah blah. Obviously, Mido joined online, and obviously one of the reasons Garley joined was because of Mido, because of the Egyptian connection. And my dad spoke to the Egyptian manager, and he was like, "Oh, we've got this really good player called Garley, blah blah blah."
Right.
Obviously, in the end, we actually got him, ironically. But for me, Garley was sort of like the early playmaker sort of player that we didn't have. I know he wasn't like a permanent fixture, like you said, and it didn't work out because of his attitude and what happened. I mean, there's no going back after you throw your shirt like that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But for me, in terms of like an actual playmaker, he was probably one of the earliest playmakers I think I saw at Tottenham.
Okay.
For me growing up, because he had a little bit of like flair with him.
Yeah. I guess it was disappointing, wasn't it?
Maybe, but
yeah, it's like the Adel Tarab.
He was before Tarab, I think, wasn't he?
He was, and he kind of fits into that category of players that you sit there and go, you see little bits of him and go, he looks like he could be quality, this guy, but actually never fully delivers or fulfills that potential that you see in those little fits and starts.
That was me for Garliers, and obviously it didn't work out. But also Iago Falque, I don't know if you remember him.
Yeah, I remember signing him.
I liked him a lot actually, and I was quite sad that we sold him. We didn't actually play him enough.
Yeah, anyway. I mean, I guess one of the other players that I always sit there and think, that geezer was Helder Postiga. Do you remember when we signed Postiga? And we thought we'd sign this young up-and-coming striker, and he was another one that was just dreadful. But then to top it all off, the minute England play Portugal, he comes on and scores. And you just go, I can't believe it. The guy can't hit a barn door for us. And when you don't want him to score against England, he scores. He just can't believe it.
Because I think that's the year Greece won the Euros as well.
Yeah, I think, it was a sickener. And he was just, one of them players, you just thought, I'd get to see that geezer,
But was there a player you ever thought that we let go too early? In terms of, we bought him with, the potential, this guy could be a player.
Yeah.
And he was showing something. But did you ever think, oh, no, why did we just sell him? Because, obviously, for me, one I can think of just off the top of my head, it was someone like Reto Ziegler.
Yeah. Yeah,
Who I've
yeah, I remember
always
him.
liked him
Yeah.
when he joined him. But is there anyone else who, like in the 80s even, like you thought, oh, why did we sell him? Because
Well, one player that we let go back in the 80s, and thankfully he rejoined the club in the sort of 90s when we were struggling, was Mickey Hazard. We let him go. Roger, oh
he's
god,
trolling.
yeah,
He's just trolling.
but yeah, Mickey Hazard, he was really unfortunate for Spurs, Mickey Hazard, because he was a Hoddle type player, but he was just around the club at the wrong time
When
because
was Hoddle there at the
yeah,
time?
so
Yeah,
he had to try and get past Hoddle, Ardiles, Vila, and it was just unfortunate for him because he could never get a regular run of games because the minute Hoddle was fit, you was like, well, Hoddle's got to come in. But Mickey Hazard was a real classy player, and thankfully, obviously he went off to join Chelsea, which wasn't great. If Twitter was around nowadays, oh God, that people would go mad.
Oh
but
God, yeah.
you crucify him now. But he came back, and when he came back, he was still, a class footballer who came into the midfield and could settle the game down and spray passes and get the game going. So yeah, we let him go probably before we should have done. But at the time, the midfield we had, you were just like, well, sorry, mate, I don't see you getting regular games in this midfield. So yeah, he was one that I always think he could have stayed and been a really good player in his prime for us.
Because I obviously never got to see any of these players like Hoddles or Dia. Was there ever even like a game which I was asked your favorite game, but obviously you watched us win more trophies than I have. I only seen us win 2 trophies. Is there a cup final that you remember that was like your favorite or anything that we won?
So 91 was my favourite cup final because that was my. Well, it wasn't my first cup final. My first FA Cup win at Wembley, because I went to the 87 cup final. Was my first FA Cup final at Wembley against Coventry, and obviously we lose 4-3, and you're devastated. It's like, oh, sorry, was it 4-3 or 3-2? 3-2. I can't. Do you know what? I can't remember now.
Is that the one where they did the song?
So obviously that was Hot Shot Tottenham. I think it was. Was it Hot Shot Tottenham?
Which is one of the Chaz and Dave? Is that?
Well, Chaz and Dave have done all of them. So you had 81 Aussie's Dream and Glory Tottenham Hotspur. Then we had Hot Shot Tottenham. And then obviously in 91 they did. We're off to Wembley because we beat the Arsenal. But that 91 goes down as my favourite. One of my favourite games, and seeing us win a trophy, at Wembley. Obviously you had the Gaza stuff during the game where Gaza, fortunate not to get sent off and then gets himself injured. Then Stuart Pearce rockets one in from a free kick, and you're just thinking, that's it. This is us. We're done. But we played really well on the day. We had a good goal disallowed. Lineker scores a really good goal that gets chalked off for offside. Then he misses a penalty. So you're starting to think this just ain't happening for us today. But we played really well. And thankfully, Paul Stewart scored the equaliser. And then Des Walker, you'll never beat Des Walker. Well, thankfully, we didn't have to that day because he did it for us by sticking one in his own top corner to win us the cup. So, and there's always great footage from that cup final because that's the one where a young Roy Keane is giving some stick to some of the Spurs players. I think it's a young Justin Edinburgh, and we had a bloke called Steve Sedgley, and then Steve Sedgley on the video on the telly, you can see Steve Sedgley giving him a little wave of appreciation to Roy Keane, winding him up. But that was a great game. But when you talk about great games, I couldn't appreciate it on the day when we lost to Coventry, but that cup final would have to go down as one of the best cup finals there's ever been, because we score after a minute, and you're thinking, Clive Allen bangs his something like 51st goal in of the season, and you're thinking, this is it. This will be a cakewalk now. We're going to murder them. They come back and equalise. We go back in front. They come back and equalise. And then, unfortunately, poor old Gary Mabbott sticks one in his own net. But that goes back to that 87 season where you just think we should have won multiple trophies and ended up with nothing in the end.
There's a lot of videos like that, I guess.
Yeah,
But yeah, at least you got to see us win something.
yeah,
but
definitely.
but a lot of people talk about the semi-final obviously more naturally because you beat Arsenal. Did you go to the semi-final?
Yeah, I was there at Wembley
What was it
that
like?
day.
Because
It was amazing.
I can't imagine facing Arsenal at Wembley in that sort of level of, what's the word? Just importance, I guess.
Well, that because like I say, that was ultimately, unfortunately, we were the team that kind of made the FA think they'll have all semi-finals at
Wembley,
Wembley, which is,
yeah.
unfortunately, I hate. But obviously, you sitting there for that game thinking, well, you got London's two biggest sides, we got to put them somewhere like that. And I remember that was another game where you're just sitting there thinking Arsenal were winning the, potentially on for the double. So you're sitting there going, thinking, we've probably got no chance today. They'll probably beat us and this will be a really horrible day to come home from there. And again, we played really well, and we could have been 2 or 3 up in early on. We really played well and played them off the park. And then, when Gaza scores that free kick,
it must have been
the
something.
atmosphere is just amazing, in that old Wembley as well with the 2 twin towers. That was something, again, that's one of those games that you sit there and go, wow, I'm thankful that I can look back on games and say, yeah, I was there for that one. I was there for this one. And that would be one of those that, again, you sit there and go, well, yeah, unfortunately, I went a couple of years later when we got them in the semi-final again at Wembley and they beat us that time. And then it was horrible.
Because obviously I was born in 92, so I definitely didn't see that 91 one because everyone always talks about it. I'm just like, and obviously the Gaza free kick must have been something incredible.
Oh, to watch live, yeah, because say you are sitting there thinking, oh, that's too far out, surely. But that was Gaza, he could do things. He could just do things like that, and that's why I say he's the closest I've ever seen to Hoddle, because they could just do things that you go, how has he done that? How has he managed to pull that off? And Gaza, so many great memories of watching Gaza, and obviously that was just prime Paul Gascoigne that year.
Because didn't Gaza go? He left. What year did he leave? And he went to like Newcastle and or something like that, or Lazio. Was it Newcastle?
So he started off at Newcastle and came to us, and then in that 91 season, we'd agreed to sell him to Lazio after the cup
I was trying to remember
final.
the order of it.
Yeah,
I do know about it.
And obviously, when he got his injury, everyone thought, well, that could be it. That deal, that won't happen. But at that time, it was Gaza mania. So I think Lazio was still of that opinion of like, well, listen, if he can get fit and he recovers, we'll still sign him because it's Gaza. And thankfully, he managed to get fit. But I'll be honest with you, I don't think he was ever the same player after that injury. So I feel really fortunate that I can sit there and say I saw prime Paul Gascoigne when he was a beast, And again, when you look there and think, what sort of player would you bring back to the current Tottenham side if you could bring back a prime Paul Gascoigne? Oh, God.
It's like, for me, I'll be like, Van der Vaart or Modric or something like that.
Yeah.
Because those were the flair players that I grew up watching.
Yeah.
Like
the sad thing is, when you think about those players, these Gascoignes and Hoddles were a step above those. So when you think how good those were, you then think, well, these guys were even better than that. So you just go, well, wow, they were some players, definitely.
Oh, wow. So now I think I'm going to talk about modern Tottenham. So, number one, who's your favourite player, you think, right now?
Harry Kane, all day long for me. I mean, he is, for me, what that guy has achieved and done at the club and done for the club. I just think, he's a great role model on and off the pitch. And for me, Harry Kane is just a,
FA Cup, Notts County.
I remember going to Notts County and losing in a League Cup when they were like 2 divisions below us. That was a horrible night. I remember that. That goes down as one of the worst games I've ever been to. But Harry Kane all day long. He is Mr. Tottenham right now, isn't he? And he will go on to beat all records, I think, and we'll be looking
Shearer's
back.
record.
I think so. Yeah, I think he's gonna. I think he's gonna get all. That England one is going very soon. he'll get the Tottenham top goal scorer, and I think he'll break the Premier League all-time scoring record. And my wife always says to me, "What are you going to do when Harry Kane actually does leave Tottenham?" And you just go, "I don't know. It's I honestly can't tell you, because it will be a really sad day when suddenly Harry Kane isn't a Tottenham player anymore, because the guy is just, there. And I had it today with a friend at work who tries but Harry Kane, he hasn't won anything, so is he really world class?" And you're just like, "Oh, please, go away, because if you don't think this guy is a world class footballer, then there's something wrong with you."
I mean, Kane. Okay, so with Kane, for me, he probably is our best player. But is there not part of you thinks a bit like annoyed that he wanted to leave to go to City, or not? Or have you just got over it now? Because I'm still more for, like, I think he's our best player. But if I'd pick one who's I can see as more loyal, I'd probably say Son.
Yeah,
because he stayed even under Nuno.
Yeah,
He's under contract, which is why I'm not saying, when seeing Harry Kane is one of our own.
Yeah.
Initially, when he came back into the team and we started singing that again, I was quite reluctant to do it.
Okay.
I've got to be honest with you. And I still feel a bit weird about it, because for me, I like you say, he's came through Spurs ranks, but for some, I was surprised that someone like Son signed a new contract, who under someone like Nuno, and he was obviously more committed. I don't know whether it's because he bought into what was being told by Levy or anyone at the time. I don't know. I can't say that. I'm just judging by what I saw. Yeah. And someone like Kane was like, "Oh no, I'm out." And I'm not saying I'm blaming Kane for wanting to leave.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, if we're looking at like loyalty and all that sort of thing, I'm a bit.
I guess the thing is, because I've grown up, and I'd say the majority of my Spurs supporting years are where we've been an underachieving club. So I've seen lots of players come, Klinsmann, when he came, was like, "Oh, well, we've got this guy." But he saw straight away, this team are never going to go and do what I want to do as a player. So he left. Sol Campbell, now, he went about it completely the wrong way and went to the team he should never have gone to. But again, he was one of those, he was the standout player. Someone had obviously said to him, "Listen, this team are never going to do what they need to do to be challenging for league titles and major honours. So you're either going to spend your career sitting here, wasting it away, or you move." Teddy Sheringham, again, I've seen so many players who were our star player, and I think they all just reached a point where they reached that point in their career where it was like, "Well, listen, I actually want to win something. I can clearly see this club are not going to do what they need to do in the transfer market to go out and get us pushing for titles. So what do I do?" Now, ultimately, I sit there with the Harry Kane thing and think, I couldn't blame him for wanting to leave at that point, because I think he saw again, Nuno was completely the wrong manager to bring in, and then a completely uninspiring choice. So I think he reached that point where someone had probably said to him, and I have to say, if he'd been my son, I think at some point I probably would have said, "Listen, you could sit here and stay at this club, and yes, you might break goal scoring records, and there'll probably be a statue of you outside this ground in 50 years or something. But what do you want to do in the game? Do you want to win titles and trophies? Because if you do, this club ain't going to do what you need them to do right now to win you or get you close to winning titles. So if that's your main aim, you're probably going to have to leave the club to go and do that." So I can understand where he was thinking. He'd been loyal. He'd stayed loyal over a number of seasons where he probably could have gone a couple of seasons before he did. So I could understand he probably reached a point, saw Nuno get appointed, and thought, "This is just that this is the final nail in the coffin." Had Conte been appointed in the summer, you might have actually seen him go, "Oh well, we've signed Conte as manager. He's no mug. Yeah, maybe I'll stick around and see how this goes under this guy." But I think Nuno being appointed, and obviously there must have been some agreement between him and Levy that, well, yeah, listen, you can go, and if City come in, we'll let you go. That was obviously broken, so he obviously had the ump a little bit. But ultimately, I just wanted the bloke to stay, because I think if he'd left, we'd have been in a mess, to be honest. Because yes, we still had Son,
we would have.
and you can't replace, even if you got 150 million for Kane, 200 million, you can't replace that player, especially when we didn't have the attraction to draw in someone of that sort of stature. It's not like we're sitting there like Liverpool at the moment. If Liverpool lose someone like Salah, they're one of the best teams in world football, so they can go out and attract the top players in world football. We were like, well, we ain't going to be able to go out and get anyone better than that. So I understand it. I'm grateful that he saw, he wasn't let go, and we got Conte. And now, obviously, hopefully, he's sitting there thinking, well, yeah, I've got a real chance of actually maybe winning stuff finally.
Because the only scenario I can think of straight away in my head that's comparable to what happened with Kane, it's not exactly entirely the same, but it's like Steven Gerrard at Liverpool.
Yeah.
When there was those Chelsea links, remember?
Yeah.
And everyone he's off to Chelsea, and then I think he got family threats or something like that, and then he stayed.
Yeah, I think it was one of them, wasn't it? As you say, that's probably the transfer I remember that's as similar, and probably because it's as close now to Premier League era as Harry Kane. But yeah, as you say, Gerrard is a Liverpool legend, and he would have spoiled that legend had he gone. But there was that view of like, well, listen, you can go to Moneybags Chelsea right now, where it's a guarantee of titles, Champions League probably. And I can understand how that player gets his head turned, because, again, someone's probably in his ear saying, Liverpool ain't going to do what they need to do to win, to get you close to winning anything, mate. So you either stick around and you never win anything, or you've got a club here that basically, at that point, essentially the Man City of the era, going, well, you've got a guarantee of trophies there. You are going to that club and you will definitely come away with honours to look back on. It's the same when Sheringham left us for Man United. I was gutted at that point, because Sheringham was one of my all-time favourite players.
I was actually going to ask you about Sheringham, because I only saw his sort of later years when he came back on a free.
Yeah.
What was he like as a player? Was he like an old-school number 10 sort of thing?
He was great. He's the closest, I think, well, for me, he's the closest I've seen to Kane now. In the fact that he was a player that could, didn't have fantastic pace, but his passing was brilliant. His football brain was really good. And he was just, he's calm. When he was in tight situations, you'd just see him pass one into the bottom corner of the net. He was just a step ahead of everyone mentally in the game. And he was a really good player, Sheringham. Like I say, he never had pace, so you knew he was never going to be a ball over the top. But he just knew where to get himself. I'll step back here and I'll get myself 5 yards of space. And then if a defender let him get that 5 yards, he'd punish you. And it's the same as Harry Kane for me. He could drop deep and he could spread the play and set things going. So yeah, he really does remind me of Harry Kane in the way they play. And yeah, I like to say, I was gutted when he left. I had one of these little toys. You remember the football?
Oh yeah, I used to have those.
Yeah, and I had a Sheringham one, and I threw it. I was so gutted that he left. I was like, get that out, throwing that bloody Teddy Sheringham. But again, you had to sit there and think, if he wants to win titles and honours, Man United have come in for him, where it is like, listen, this isn't a you might win something. This is a you will win honours, So I can never blame a player in that situation.
Oh, didn't he pace first?
Yeah, I say Mark summed it up there. His football brain was just amazing.
For me, the closest I've seen to someone like that, I'd say if it's someone like Berbatov, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, Berbatov. Yeah, I mean that was a class.
He was another one. Like I was like you, like when he left, I was like,
Yeah, he was
different. He went to United.
Yeah, that's right. But again, it was that thing, wasn't it? Of like, oh, United want you. It's a guarantee of league titles.
Yeah, exactly.
Or you stay at Spurs and probably never get anywhere near it.
Yeah,
Like,
especially at the
I'll
time,
go
we were like
United.
fifth or something.
Yeah,
Like
that's right.
fifth, sixth, that sort of.
Yeah, Martin Joel was just turning Tottenham into an actual team that would fight for those top 4 places.
So in terms of modern Tottenham, who would you rate as like the best manager? And if you want to say Conte, it's fine because I would say Conte. But is there an argument for say someone else? Like I have very fond memories of the Redknapp era. So
Yeah.
in terms of pure football and pure just enjoyment, I'd probably say just Redknapp.
Yeah.
But if we're talking solid a winner and someone who I think is like the best, I'd probably say I have to say Conte, even though he's only been here for 6 months.
Yeah. So for me, I think, like as you say, I think if we're looking now, the future for me, I feel really positive about this season coming up with Conte, and I finally think this bloke could be the manager that's going to win us something.
Yeah.
But if I sit there and think, but I don't think I can judge him just yet based on how long he's been there. Yeah. So I sit there and go, Poch of the modern managers is my favourite manager. I honestly feel, unfortunately, I blame him in a way, but he was criminally, done with the transfers and backing he got. But I blame him for some of that because I think when he really had all the cards in his hand around the fact that, listen, if you were to sack me right now, the fans would riot. I don't think he ever pushed the ball the way, say, someone like Conte has now, that's saying, listen, if you don't back me, I'll walk, and then you'll be in big trouble.
I think that's the main difference. Like you said, Poch wasn't prepared to walk away.
Yeah, that's right.
So he lost the power in some sense.
Yeah, he didn't use at the point where Poch should have said, if you don't back me in the transfer market now, I'll walk, and the fans will riot, which they would have done at that point. Then I think, well, you probably cost yourself a little bit by being too nice and being too prepared to work on a shoestring. But he has to go down as, I would say, my favourite modern manager because he did build a great Spurs side. At that point, we were brilliant to watch. We were this great young pressing side. Yeah. And I think at that point, everyone in England probably would have said, who do you like watching on telly? Yeah. They would have said, well, I do like watching Tottenham play. And then second would be Redknapp because, I loved the Redknapp era. It was great. You're right. Okay. Redknapp was great, though.
I think it's also because I always liked Redknapp even before it was at Tottenham.
Yeah.
Pochettino, I didn't know much about him before.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm saying I didn't rate him, or I wasn't fond of his tenure. But over Redknapp, I had sort of a connection from before.
Yeah.
And also just Redknapp was just such a character compared to someone like Pochettino, who was very just straight to the point.
Yeah.
He did talk in riddles sometimes, but as in it wasn't as fun to watch. Like with Redknapp's press conferences, I just chuck him on and he would say something completely.
He just says, he's not going to lie. He's just going to tell you how it is. Nah, he was crap. My missus could have scored that header from there.
Yeah, exactly.
And Darren Bent has never recovered from that comment, by the way. He has the biggest chip on his shoulder ever about Spurs. But Redknapp was great, hanging out the car on transfer deadline day. Well, he's a good boy, might get him in. He was a manager that you couldn't not like,
He was just such a likable person.
Yeah, he was.
I've met Jamie a couple of times. I mean, he's not exactly likable. I've met him a couple of times actually at Spurs. We know Redknapp was manager.
Yeah.
I just caught him a couple of times walking into the bit or something. I can't remember exactly. But I always wanted to meet Harry, but I never did.
Yeah, like I say, for me, it's Poch and Redknapp, with Joel then third, because I think Joel was the manager that really started turning us into a real challenging side where you were going, we're actually a club that finally and now look like we're starting to go somewhere under this manager. So
I think with Joel also, people forget he had such a, I'm not saying bad squad, I don't know if that's a word to put it, but he worked with not very good players.
Yeah.
And he got us to the point where we were almost, and we should have really, overtook Arsenal that year in 06. For me, we were better than them that year. And also we had
apart from Lasagna Gate at the end.
But for me, for what he had compared to say the Arsenal side, or even some other sides in that league, he did so well.
Yeah.
Timo Tainio, I'm quite fond of him, but again, he wasn't
Salteri.
These players,
players like that.
They weren't great players,
Yeah.
but he did something with them. Like he created a team spirit, and obviously he was lucky he had the strikers, I guess, to score the goals.
Yeah, I mean, imagine at that point, mate, where you had four, strikers.
Yeah.
The Twitter couldn't handle Spurs having four strikers like that
nowadays.
nowadays. Nah, we can't have four players like that. But you had Keane, Berbatov, Defoe, Mido, all fighting for those forward places. Darren Bent at one point, that when we signed him was a player that everyone was clamouring for because he had a good record. So yeah, I mean, we had some fabulous attacking options.
And also, you forget it was a time when you had teams like United who were still under Fergie.
Yeah.
And you had Chelsea, I think.
Chelsea, yeah, I would say Chelsea in their pomp.
When
yeah,
Mourinho was first there. Concerning what he had, he did really, really well.
Yeah, he did, yeah. And like as you say, we, unfortunately, apart from that last Lasagna game, we should have finished above Arsenal that season, and then who knows where it went from there. And obviously, the way that he was sacked just wasn't.
It wasn't nice.
Didn't sit well with anyone. Yeah.
No. I mean, I was quite young at the time, so I didn't understand the whole Levy out thing after that because I was quite young. And you'll find it's quite funny because I feel like I've been on a roller coaster, but I was quite Levy in at that point.
Okay.
And I only turned in 2012, like properly. The school was totally turning. And let's see if it's going to do a reverse now, but we'll see if he stays away from the football.
Well, it's looking promising so far. Yeah.
Yeah, but I was in Cyprus when it happened, and in an Irish pub, I can't remember the name of it. And normally I'd go to that game, but we're on holiday. And the people there before the game were telling us, he's been sacked. And I'm like, what? Like, what's happening?
Right.
And at the time, we weren't doing well. So I was like, I can understand why you get sacked.
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't know the ins and outs of it. And whilst I was following transfers on these random Spurs sites, I don't remember some names of them, that Spurs blog something. And I don't think they exist anymore.
I remember using Spurs line, mate, where you used to call up a number to get your Spurs news. Yeah,
teletext. Yeah. Do you remember Diego, who went to what was the team he went to? Werder Bremen. Do you remember this Brazilian called Diego?
No.
So before he went there, and some other club before that, Spurs wanted him when he was in Brazil or something.
Okay.
And I had this memory as a kid. I was checking teletext every day because obviously at the time 10 million and 15 million was quite big money.
Right.
This is in the late 90s before Abramovich came in and totally blew everything out of the water. And I was looking at teletext. Oh, Diego, we've been for Diego. We never got him in the end. and he went off somewhere else. And since then I was like, who's Diego? Is what's he doing? Because it's like Damião, I guess. But
no, the old Damião, yeah.
Like a throwback Damião because he was Brazilian as well, Diego. But this is what I remember as a kid, just teletext and that sort of thing.
Oh, yeah.
But, Joel for me was just... if you look back now, the manner of the sacking for me, I didn't like.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
At the time, I was too young to realise it.
Yeah.
But in the sense that obviously now I've heard other things that he wasn't backed in certain ways and he didn't want Darren Bent. Because at the time I was like, oh, Darren Bent. Like you said at the time, Darren Bent, we thought, oh, it's a good signing. Cause
he was on fire. Before
that, so.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but he wanted other players. And looking back, I can see why people turned on Levy even then.
Yeah, I think Joel was one of those managers, wasn't he? That it was the famous, even Hoddle, when Hoddle took over, said, I wanted Moriarty's and Samueto, and I ended up getting X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And that was all you used to hear, managers saying, well, yeah, but I wanted this player and that player, and I ended up with X, Y, and Z, even Redknapp, wasn't it? The January.
That's the one let's go out. Nelson and Saha,
we could have gone out and got Hazard, Eden Hazard.
Yeah.
And we end up with Saha and Nelson, and history's, we crumble and fall down the table at that point.
So it's almost like I've been on a 10-year. Does that make sense? Yeah. So in terms of Tottenham right now, we're going to shy away from this. We signed Perisic, we signed Forster, and it's the 16th of June. And Basuma's probably going to be announced at least, I think, by tomorrow, let's say. Yeah. So with this new change of mentality in the way we're doing things, how do you feel about going into next season? What do you think we can do? And what further signings do you want and in what positions to just.
Yeah, see, I feel really confident right now in a new season based on the big transfer business we've done and the manager we've got in, because I think I kind of last season on obviously the Coys, we were saying that, and I'd always said this for me was always last chance saloon for Levy and Enid, because they brought Conte in. If they didn't back him this summer and he walked, I think where the fan base was kind of split, I think the whole fan base would then have turned and gone, well, listen, that's it. You've had your chances, blown it. So I always felt confident with Conte that he might get the backing finally and we might see the club do something different. So thankfully, it looks like that's what's happening. We're going to win the quadruple. Who knows? But I think we're looking confident now. And I think under Conte, realistically for me, what this season needs to be is we get closer to the top two. Because I think when you look at it, City and Liverpool, their recent signings don't scare me. So Haaland doesn't bother me because I sit there and think Man City and Liverpool were already brilliant attacking teams. So they never had problems scoring goals, and they were already brilliant up front. So does City signing Haaland really change anything?
I mean, see, for me it does, because before they had Jesus, who's on his way to Arsenal. Now they have arguably one of potentially the top two players in the world in Haaland. For me, I think he's going to be like the next Ronaldo.
Ultimately,
but with Liverpool,
in the grand scheme of things, there's only so many wins you can get. And it might just be, okay, like say the games where they used to beat Burnley 4-0. Okay, say they stick 7 past them. Does that really change anything?
I know what you're saying.
From a Tottenham perspective?
With Liverpool, though, I feel a lot more confident about beating them and finishing above them.
I think this guy they've signed, there's a lot of hype around him, and I don't think he's going to be. I mean, I remember we signed a top scorer from that league a little while ago, didn't we? And he was a 2-yard knocking merchant, Vinicius, who was, I think I couldn't stand him. Great against lower league sides, smashing him in from 2 yards and then standing there like mate, when you play against Chelsea, can you do something like that against Chelsea, please? So those signings don't bother me too much. But what I want to see us do, and I think we will, is just get closer to those two, because they are still in a league of their own. Those two, the title will be between Liverpool and Man City.
See, it obviously depends on how we go on in the transfer window. But for me, if we buy, say, Eriksen comes in, Bissouma's done. If we buy someone like a proper centre half, and we go out and solve this forward issue.
So, what do you think about? See, for me, I quite happily take the Richarlison.
See, I'm not keen on him.
Only because of where he can play in all those positions.
But do you think he's going to be a Bergwijn replacement, or do you think he's going to be a striker backup? Because the only reason I say this is that I saw a tweet earlier today, I can't remember who it was by, saying that Spurs are looking at wingers. I assume it's to replace Bergwijn, because he's the one on the way out for now.
Yeah.
And Jesus is off the cards now, so let's forget him. A Richarlison and St. Maxim. I quite like a Newcastle as well.
If you offered me St. Maxim, I'd say sign that bloke tomorrow, because
Rolls Royce under
he's a great player.
Conte.
He scares teams as well. I mean, when you watch him in full flight, he's terrifying, and you can see teams and defenders are literally just like, oh my god, please get this guy off the ball. We marshalled him really well when we played him, but he tears teams apart. He's
also just one of those players who's just like amazing to watch, because he's just so good.
When he gets the ball, you think, right, what's he going to do now? Here we go. Where's he? What's going to happen? I'm like you.
In that respect, then, do you think we're going to get another proper striker? Because if Bergwijn and Richarlison comes in,
I think I could see the Richarlison deal happening. Because I think he's the player that could play in a Son or Kulusevski position, but also then play as the main striker if you needed to. Or again, if Kane, you're not playing Kane, you move Son up top and Richarlison goes and takes that position out wide. So I wouldn't be, I'd be quite happy if we signed Richarlison. For me now, as you say, if we got another centre half, Whether the Bastoni deal is dead completely or whether there's still something there on that one. I still think there'll be a surprise when it comes to a centre back. If you could get Ericsson in now with the business we've done, then I think you've got a brilliant midfield there for the season. That will be a class midfield. And then, if you've got someone like Richarlison who can play in all those positions across the top three, given the fact as well you've got the 5 subs next season, so you need that depth and those players that you can bring on. I think we could go into the season really optimistic that, we can push those top 2. I'd take third right now and actually get within, say, 4 or 5 points of Liverpool and City. And then the ultimate thing that we have to do is a good Champions League run, but we must win a cup. The League Cup,
the FA
Cup. We need to win one of those this season to show signs of progression and then make Conte think, if we've done that this season, we're now third, pushing those 2. We've won silverware. We've had a good Champions League run. Now, again, if we go and sign a couple more players, then we can actually really start thinking about the title.
Yeah, like for me, it probably will take 2 years to bridge the gap between those 2.
I think so, I think
transfer windows, however you want to put it. I mean, but
I'm
still quite confident that we can make an actual charge. To be honest,
I am. I would not be surprised if come Christmas we're second. We're second or third, but a couple of points away from those 2, and you are starting to think, well, actually, we're in with a shout, and then of course we'll come to January. Where then you go, all right. Do we sign a couple of players to push us on again, or or do we stick? But I am confident we're going to have a good season this year under Conte.
So this is it's not completely off topic, but I was going to ask you. You've been running Coys.com for how many years now?
So we've been doing that. With Coys.com Coys.com has been about 2 years, but before that we were the eSpurs pod.
You were eSpurs.
So we were eSpurs, but so what happened was I started getting into podcasts when I was traveling into work into London, when podcasts started becoming like, there's these Tottenham podcasts that you can listen to. And at that time, you had Steve with the Hotspurs podcast.
Yeah, I know him.
You had the Fighting Cock. And then at that point, it was the eSpurs podcast. And that was Ricky Sachs and the guys who now do Last Word on Spurs. Yeah. And what happened was I went on there and did a couple of shows, but they fell out with the guy who was running the eSpurs thing. Yeah, he was pushing anti-Levy. Yeah, he was pushing an anti-Levy agenda, and they were like, "Listen, we don't think that's a great thing to do." Yeah. So they went off and formed their own thing and went on to what they are now. Yeah. And me, Dan Tracy, and James McCarthy kind of said, "Well, okay, we'll take over the eSpurs one and we'll run that." And we went along for quite a while doing that one, but we ran into the same kind of issue. We were doing these podcasts, and at that point, we were relying on the guy running the account to kind of do what he needed to promote and all that stuff. And it was a bit, I think he had some health issues as well, which didn't help. But we could record one week and the podcast never went out. So we was a bit like, this is getting a little bit, silly, because we're kind of almost wasting our time. So then we looked, well, okay, we'll go off on our own. And then Coys came to us and we're like, well, would you want to do a podcast for us? And then from that point, Dan took. So
you're not the one who runs the Coys account, are you?
So I am not technically the Coys account. I do some of the tweets and stuff for them. But there's another guy, Alfie, who is the sort of like owner of Coys.com, and he does more of the sort of like business side of it. He does the merchandise and everything.
Because before you guys did the YouTube, because obviously I've been on your YouTube channel, you guys just had the pod. Because I went on it once or twice. Yeah. But like, what would you say is like the difference to say between just going on someone's podcast, right, and just actually running one?
So this is a real tough one, because I at one point was going to look to go off and do my own podcasts and stuff like that and break away from Coys and do YouTube and that. But the one thing I don't think people realise is the effort that you have to put in when you're running a podcast or a YouTube channel, and it's, you know, behind the scenes, you're trying to get guests to come on the show. You're trying to work out, right, what do we talk about on this show? You're making thumbnails, and you know, you're pushing tweets out, and and all of a sudden it's very easy, it can really take over your life. You know, where you actually start thinking, you know, you'll be trying to work, but then you're thinking, all right, what thumbnail can I do? Oh yeah, and you'll go off, and before you know it, you've spent the whole day making a thumbnail, setting up the podcast, reaching out to people on Twitter to try and see get guests on, and it starts taking up so much time that people don't. I don't think people appreciate till they actually went to do it. How much time it actually takes. And obviously there's money involved. You know, I think some people think, oh, these people who are doing podcasts, they're earning money from it. Well, they're not. No one's earning any money. If anything, you end up shelling money out, you know, because you've got to pay for your StreamYard account, or, you know, you've got to pay for the thumbnail, creative stuff like that. So, you know, all these things cost, you know, £15 a month or something. So the people who do the podcast and do the streaming and everything like that, I don't think people realise the effort that goes in, and the fact that those people are doing it just because they have a love of talking football and talking Tottenham. So it's much easier to come on someone else's show and just give your views, because you just get sent a link and you click it and, right, I'm talking Tottenham. Whereas behind the scenes, the effort and work that you're putting in to set it all up, and you have to start pushing content out. Like during the season, you might play on Sunday, then you're playing on Wednesday. And if you really want to do it properly, you do a podcast after each game. But then, you know, you're sitting there, oh, listen, love, you know, we played, you know, I did a podcast last night. Yeah, well, I've got to do one tomorrow night. And then after that, I'm doing another one on that night. And before you know, the missus is going, you know, what's going on here? But yeah, it's so time consuming.
Did you see our fixture list?
When you put Champions League, League Cup,
I don't know what I'm going to do when Champions League starts.
It's you know, and it is like, hard.
How many shows can you do in a week? And then
that's the thing,
actual, like, you know, I've got a job as well, so it's like how I'm just wondering, since it's like, because you've been running Coys for a long time, and you said people do it for the love of Tottenham, right? That's why I'm doing it, because I enjoy talking about Tottenham. And it's fun. I mean, it's just good. It's fun. So, like, I know some people do make money off these podcasts and that sort of thing. Because of sponsorships and whatnot. But in terms of someone like Coys.com, because you guys have a sort of with an account as well. And I see your tweets. So do you, obviously you do the behind the scenes as well with the guests?
TweetDeck. So, I mean, TweetDeck is a great thing because you can schedule tweets to come out at certain times and stuff like that. So you can set a lot of that sort of stuff up in the background, so that, you know, if you see a tweet at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning from the Quiz.com account, that tweet is already been prepped and is sitting there ready to go. But that again means you got to sit there and start thinking, right, I need to get the next 4 days tweets lined up and get them ready and put pictures and links to clips or stuff like that all in there. So again, it is all sort of like, you know,
it's like a 24-hour job as well.
Yeah, it is, because then you've got to promote as well. So you know, we've only started Twitter properly, YouTube properly last season, midway through. Because we started off just being the podcast, and then we kind of said, well, look, YouTube seems to be the thing that people like doing now, watching YouTube. So I think Dan, who obviously was with us, I don't think he was, you know, necessarily that comfortable with the whole YouTube situation. So he was a bit like, oh, well, I'll step away and you guys do it. So when you're building your YouTube channel, because you're not one of the first ones out there, then you've got to try and build up your subscriber base. And that basically means you've got to be pumping tweets out, constantly promoting your videos and, please subscribe and like the videos.
Yeah.
And you are. It's a
Yeah.
constant, it's a constant
and the thing with football as well is just sometimes things just change in like 5 seconds. It's just like suddenly, or Spurs signing so-and-so. All right, I think jump on the stream now.
Yeah.
Or like you get invited to someone else's. I know we're talking about just running one, but you get invited to someone else's one. And you're just like, oh no, but I was supposed to do this today. Or
See, I obviously doing the coys. We'll do our ones. Then I've been on, say, like your show. Been on Holly's show.
Well.
And then there's Tommy talks ball.
I know him.
And the Hotspur Hood. You go on all these people. You get asked to go on all these people's shows. And then, like, as you say, it's not only, right, I've got to fit my podcast in, but then I need to go on this person's show on that day, that person's show on that day, this time, that time. And it can take over your life. It really can take over your life. And especially if you want to get it up and running and get it popular. Ultimately, I sometimes think, I listen to some of the more popular ones and think, I'm not sure how this get so many views or stuff like that, because I watch some of the others and think that that's not particularly that great. The football chat and the Spurs chat's not necessarily that great football
that deep
chat or that deep. So, but then you'll sit there and go, but they've got X amount of people watching live and they've got that many subscribers. Well, we're probably as good as that. It's just, if you got in late, it's hard to build it up. But
I don't think it's just like, I don't think we can talk about like, oh, it's impossible. But for anyone else watching this, I would say I agree totally with the hard work, because obviously this is quite new to me as well.
Yeah.
And thinking about content to do, like the video we did tonight, was something I had to try and think of. Oh, what can I do during the transfer season, which is just about transfers, but we still keep people engaged with the channel, or just engaged with podcast, however you want to put it. Like, it takes a lot of time.
Oh, it does. Yeah, it's a thankless task.
Like, new ideas, and it's like running a podcast is hard.
Yeah,
but at the same time, you can't think it's like impossible to become big or that sort of thing, because I think
it's just work.
Something can just happen just like that.
See, we had videos. We were pumping our videos out, and we've got, I think it's 106 subscribers now. So it's built up really quickly since we started, which is great. But the views sometimes on the videos were getting like 78 views or something. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you find that one video that we put out a Son video saying, was Son overrated or is he world class? And right now it's up to about 4,000 views.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which is like, for us, it's like, well, wow, that video just hit the right time. And it's all about being lucky. See, that's the thing as well. When we do our podcast show, I then have to also, afterwards I spend about a day editing. So I'll be trying to take smaller clips from that one show to pump out in the week, where I go, well, okay, I'll take a 2-minute video. Yeah, Coys.com on YouTube. So you can spend a day editing, where you're going to take a 2-minute section of that whole podcast just to pump out in the week. But as you say, you can do a big section on Heung-min Son, and the next day, oh, that's old news now. It's all about Eric Dyer. Yeah. So you're like, oh, right, Eric Dyer's not in the England squad. Quick, boys, should we do a stream on Eric Dyer and get some comments on this? So, and if you've got a full-time job, it is. You can get taken, you could spend days doing YouTube stuff, because it consumes you when you're doing it.
Like, for example, for anyone watching this, the transfer stream I did with like Billy, I don't know if you watched that, with Billy, Josh, Southview Coys, it was a massive thing to plan that many people to come on at once, and also to plan all the Excel spreadsheets I did, ABB style. It took me literally like 2 days.
Mate, I say you went hardcore on that one. It's like you went hardcore, mate. I could see the effort that had been put in.
Like literally, I was literally just sitting there all day, just going like, Oh, which way we linked with? Oh, got added to this, and even then, I think I
Yeah,
probably forgot a couple of players that we were linked with on that list.
that's the only trouble with the transfer ones is you can sometimes be talking about players that ultimately is a bit
Never
like the
come,
club
yeah.
were never even interested
Yeah.
in him, and I've done a whole stream about this bloke, and it's a bit like, well, that's in the bin. Don't bother putting that one out. So,
It's like I
yeah.
spent a while talking about Jesus, for example, and now he's gone Arsenal.
Right. Yeah. It is. I'm not, like I say, we love doing it because if you love talking Tottenham, then it's a passion. But there is a lot of work that goes in. But the only one thing that can be frustrating is like I do the hosting for the Coys.com one. So quite often I'm not really giving my opinion
exactly.
on certain things. So I let the guys give their opinions on what they think. And there can be times where you think, oh, I had a different opinion on that, but it's not, I'm just hosting it. So like people sometimes don't actually get to hear my opinion on something as much as when you join someone else's as a guest, you can really let go and say what you want to say.
Yeah, I agree with that totally. Because obviously I'm used to just on Twitter just spouting opinions, and then with this I'm just like I ask the question, I'm just like just speak, just the floor's yours.
Yeah, you speak, and when anyone starts giving abuse, I'm just saying, listen, I just asked the questions, mate. It was nothing to do with me.
Yeah. But yeah, it's like just for anyone watching this, it takes a lot of time, and you just have to be like, committed to doing it. That's all.
Time and effort, and like I say, probably maybe Chris Cowlin and Last Word on Spurs earn money from what they do.
I think that's it. It's only them. Yeah.
But I can't. No one else I could imagine is actually earning money.
But no, I think there are people that are, but because they're not verified.
Yeah, it's probably
like Cowlin,
a pound or stuff. Yeah, people like
we
Chris
don't hear
Cowlin.
about it. Yeah.
So yeah, it is. Normally you're spending money, but listen, we love doing it. It is great stuff. So yeah, not going to stop right now. We'll carry on into next season, and you've always got to be looking and thinking, right? How do we change it? What do we do differently this season that we didn't next season to make it get a little bit fresher and that? So it's good fun. It looks like I'm in a disco right now, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I was going to say it was a flashing lights on.
It's because I've got no lights on. It started when I was bright when it started.
Yeah. So just to finish, to close it off. So one thing, what's your next Spurs dream signing and a prediction for next season? I know you kind of gave me one earlier, but.
So I think the dream signing now that really pushes us would be Bastoni. I think if we can get him, I think that gives us a solid defence, and then the midfield is looking good. So yeah, I then think if we could get him in, then I think we could really be going places this season, definitely. So
do you think third in the trophy? You think?
Yeah, I'd like to think so. For me, that would be if you offered me third and an FA Cup right now, I'd go, yeah, that for me is what and that's what I think we should be doing. I think, I know we laugh about quadruple and stuff like that, but I do think that's probably above us at this moment. We're probably maybe one or two transfer windows away from that with this manager. But yeah, if we can get closer to the top two and even win one or two trophies, League Cup and FA Cup, and get third, then I think we could be really pleased and proud of that.
So I think we will win a trophy. Either the FA
I
Cup
do. Yeah, I do. I'm confident.
But I think we'll finish second, so I think we might push to the end.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. I like it. It's confidence.
I don't know why I fancy us. I fancy us over Liverpool right now.
Okay. Well, at least we've seen, though, haven't we, that we can beat those top two. They couldn't beat us last season, so if we've improved
an extra bit, I think.
Yeah,
we could beat them.
We can do what we can do against the teams that we stumble up against, and not do that this season. But thankfully, Burnley won't be around, so they won't cause us a fucking problem.
Burnley. Do you think the World Cup's going to affect the season a lot or not? In terms of just that break, you've got that team.
Yeah, it's a horrible one, isn't it?
Will not come back.
Yeah, it's horrible, especially when your key players are players who will be big parts for their countries. You know, you got the fear, haven't you, that Kane comes back cropped or something, and you just think, oh, please, all those players that go, please come back.
I think it's going to cause an absolute mess.
It will, because the fitness levels and that will not be there. You know, players will, you know, tiredness will kick in, and that World Cup's going to take a lot out of players because of the heat and everything that there will be there. So a big squad, and this is why I think there is such an element of this season. You need to have a decent squad depth, because you are going to have points where those players need resting, and which is why I think the Richarlison deal, something like that, makes sense. You know, Prem proven. You know, he's not someone that we're getting where you think, oh, you know, bloke's not played in England before. He's Premiership proven, so we know he can do the business in this league.
Because my dream signing would probably someone like Osimhen from Napoli.
Okay,
probably.
yeah, I'm all right. Yeah,
strikers. Then,
he would be class, wouldn't he?
Or
he would be class.
Nkunku, how do you say Nkunku?
Something like Nkunku, yeah.
They're
yeah, they are. Yeah. I guess the only
they're like statement signings.
Yeah, but I guess, and I'm not saying we shouldn't, but the only problem is because you got Kane.
Yeah.
Any one of those players knows I'm coming in probably to play second fiddle most of the season, which is where I think someone like the Richarlison is more of a realistic option, because I think given the club he's been playing for us and Champions League and everything is a step up, and he probably actually goes, well, I'll actually take some rotation, being a rotation player, whereas those big statement signings probably think, well, no, I'm not. I'm behind Harry Kane. I've got no chance.
But Nkunku, I think he can play almost anywhere, from what I read.
Like he looks a great player. Yeah, he looks a good player. I mean, listen, the way it's going at the moment, and we're in dreamland, aren't we? So you never know.
I'm thinking plays like that now. So.
We could be having. We could have anyone could turn up tomorrow.
Especially because I keep reading stuff on Twitter saying like, oh, like Spurs are doing stuff behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So who knows what's going to happen next?
Well, as long as we make some more signings that destroy the Arsenal Twitter base, mate, then
Twitter spaces,
I'm all for it. Yeah, because you know the meltdowns we've had over the last few days have been fantastic.
I mean, if you haven't checked those Twitter spaces, you need to check those Twitter spaces.
Get in one. If you see a Twitter space that's got Arsenal fans on it, jump in just for a listen, because it's great fun right now.
It's been, honestly, the past few days have been so fun.
It's been great having you on, Carl. It's been a pleasure, mate.
And come on, you Spurs.
Yeah, come on, you Spurs.